You expect me to believe you live here?
Yes, this is my house. My ID is in my back pocket.
Yeah? Funny how nobody around here knows you.
I just moved in this morning.
You don't just move in here, not without someone noticing.
My daughter is inside.
Then maybe you should have thought about that before.
At 11:47 a.m. on a Saturday morning in the gated community of Prescott Ridge, a white woman dialed 911 and reported a break-in in progress. She described the suspect as a black female, acting erratic, possibly armed, moving boxes out of a residence on Wyndham Lane. She used the phrase, "she doesn't belong here," twice during the call. Police arrived 7 minutes later with lights, sirens, and weapons drawn. The woman they surrounded on the front lawn was not a burglar. She was Judge Denise Ayanna Carter, newly appointed to the United States District Court for the Western District of North Carolina, confirmed by the Senate just 3 weeks earlier. She was carrying a box of her daughter's books. Her 10-year-old, Naomi, was watching from inside the house through the living room window. Within minutes, Denise was face down on her own freshly laid sod, wrists cuffed behind her back, a knee pressed into her spine, while her daughter screamed from behind the glass.
The 911 caller watched from her porch with her arms crossed. She never flinched. What none of them knew yet, not the caller, not the officers, not the HOA president who had quietly made this neighborhood her personal checkpoint, was that within 72 hours, federal investigators would be pulling phone records, body cam footage, and HOA emails. Careers would be destroyed, criminal charges would be filed, and the woman they had just put on the ground would be sitting on the federal bench, presiding over the very type of case they had just created. Prescott Ridge sat 6 miles outside Charlotte, North Carolina, behind a stone wall and a wrought iron gate that opened only with a resident code or a guard's approval. The home started at $1.2 million. The lawns were edged weekly by contracted crews who were let in through the service entrance and expected to leave by 4 p.m. There was a clubhouse, a private pool, and a quarterly newsletter that featured recipes, landscaping tips, and reminders about community standards. On paper, it was one of the most desirable neighborhoods in the region. In practice, it had never had a black homeowner. Not once in 26 years. That wasn't an accident. It was a culture. The Homeowners Association, led by its long-serving president Karen Langford, 58, a retired real estate broker with a firm smile and a tighter grip on the neighborhood than any board member before her, had spent years building an invisible fence far more effective than the iron one at the entrance. Under her leadership, police had been called to Prescott Ridge 14 times in the past 3 years for suspicious individuals. Every single one involved a person of color. A black landscaper was questioned for 25 minutes while his white employer watched from her porch without saying a word. A Latino delivery driver was followed by a resident in an SUV from the gate to his stop and back again. A black real estate agent showing a listing to a qualified buyer was held at the gate for 40 minutes while Karen personally called the listing office to verify authorization. None of these incidents were ever formally reported. None were challenged. No one filed a complaint because no one in Prescott Ridge saw a problem. That was the neighborhood Judge Denise Ayanna Carter had just moved into, and it was the neighborhood that was about to learn what happens when the person you try to push out has the full weight of the federal government behind her. Denise Ayanna Carter was not born into the world that Prescott Ridge represented. She grew up in Sandtown, Winchester, one of Baltimore's poorest neighborhoods, in a 2-bedroom apartment with her mother Gloria and 2 younger siblings. Gloria worked double shifts as a hospital custodian and still couldn't always make rent. There were nights the power went out. There were weeks groceries ran thin. But Gloria Carter had one rule that never bent. You will study. You will read. You will become something they can't take from you. Denise listened. She graduated valedictorian from a public high school with a crumbling gymnasium and no AP courses. A full scholarship took her to Spelman College. Another took her to Howard University's School of Law, where she graduated top of her class. She clerked for a federal appellate judge on the 4th Circuit, then joined the Department of Justice as a civil rights prosecutor. For 12 years, she built cases against police departments that profiled, brutalized, and discriminated. She prosecuted officers who used badges as weapons.
She sued housing authorities that redlined black families out of neighborhoods exactly like Prescott Ridge. She knew the law. She knew the patterns. She knew how power worked when no one was watching. When the president nominated her to the federal bench, she became one of the youngest black women ever appointed to a U.S. district court. The Senate confirmed her, 58-42. She purchased the house on Wyndham Lane because she wanted her daughter, Naomi, to grow up somewhere safe, with good schools and open space. That Saturday morning, wearing jeans and a Howard University sweatshirt, she carried boxes from a moving truck into her new home. She had no idea her neighbor was already watching. Karen Langford had seen the moving truck pull onto Wyndham Lane at 9:15 a.m. She noticed it from her kitchen window while pouring her second cup of coffee. When a black woman stepped out of the cab and began unloading boxes, Karen set the cup down and didn't pick it up again. She watched for 20 minutes. She studied the woman's movements, the way she walked back and forth between the truck and the front door, the way she paused on the porch and looked around. To anyone else, it was a person moving into a new home. To Karen, it was a threat. She picked up her phone and called Linda Greaves, 2 houses down. Did you know someone was moving into the Wyndham house? Linda didn't. Karen called Paul Fenton across the street. Same answer. No one had heard. No one had been told. In Karen's mind, that absence of information was confirmation enough. She had told 3 different neighbors over the past month that she hoped the Wyndham property would go to the right kind of family. She never defined what that meant. She never had to. At 11:38 a.m., Karen dialed 911. The transcript would later be entered into federal evidence. There's a black woman at 4912 Wyndham Lane. She's going in and out of the house. I don't think she lives here. She's acting erratic, looking around like she's casing the place. I think she might be armed. I saw something in her waistband. She doesn't belong here. The object in Denise's waistband was a tape measure she had tucked there while measuring the front door frame for a new screen door. Karen used the phrase, "she doesn't belong here," twice during the call. The dispatcher classified it as a burglary in progress with a possibly armed suspect. 2 patrol units were sent, lights and sirens. Officer Wade Prescott was 43 years old with 18 years on the force and a personnel file thick enough to warrant its own drawer. 7 complaints of excessive force, 3 allegations of racially biased stops, all dismissed. All buried under internal review processes that treated civilian complaints like paperwork to be filed, not problems to be solved. Prescott had never been suspended, never been reprimanded in writing, never faced a single consequence for any of it. He had learned over nearly 2 decades that complaints disappeared and badges didn't. His partner that morning was Officer Danny Lucero, 29, 4 years on the job. Lucero was quiet, agreeable, and had never once questioned a senior officer's judgment on a call. He followed. That was his role, and he had never been given a reason to reconsider it. When the dispatch came through at 11:45 a.m., the call was coded as a burglary in progress, possibly armed suspect, residential neighborhood. Prescott pulled the cruiser out of a gas station lot and hit the lights. Lucero checked his sidearm. Neither officer ran the address through property records. Neither checked the county assessor database, which would have shown the home had been purchased 3 weeks earlier by Denise A. Carter. They didn't look at the mailbox when they arrived, which already bore her name in neat black letters. They pulled the cruiser directly onto the front lawn, tires cutting into fresh sod, and exited with weapons drawn. Denise was standing on the front porch holding a cardboard box labeled Naomi's Books in black marker. She looked up and saw 2 officers pointing service weapons at her chest. Behind her, through the living room window, her 10-year-old daughter Naomi stood frozen, watching her mother stare down the barrels of 2 guns. Prescott shouted first, "Drop it! Hands where I can see them! Get off the porch! Now!" Denise set the box down slowly, her hands rising to shoulder height, palms open and facing forward. She kept her voice even. "Officers, my name is Judge Denise Carter. This is my home. I just moved in today. I can show you my identification." Prescott didn't pause. Sure you are, and I'm the mayor. Step off the porch and get on the ground. Now. Denise stayed calm. Sir, I am a federal judge with the United States District Court. My ID is in my back pocket. My daughter is inside. She's 10 years old. Please don't scare her. Prescott stepped closer, his weapon still raised. I'm not going to ask again. On the ground. Lucero circled to her left, positioning himself behind her, cutting off any path back toward the front door. Denise lowered herself to one knee slowly, still speaking. I'm complying. I'm not resisting. Please, my daughter is watching. Prescott holstered his weapon, grabbed her right wrist, twisted it behind her back, and drove her face first into the lawn. The impact was hard enough to press grass and dirt into the side of her face. He wrenched her other arm back and snapped the cuffs on while planting a knee between her shoulder blades. Inside the house, Naomi screamed. The sound cut through the morning air and reached every porch on the street. Neighbors stepped outside. At least 4 phones began recording. Karen Langford stood on her own porch 15 yards away, arms crossed, watching. She nodded once. Denise spoke into the grass. My daughter is inside, alone. She's 10. Please don't frighten her. Please. Prescott didn't respond. Lucero, without a warrant, without permission, without probable cause, walked to the front door, pushed it open, and entered the home with his weapon drawn. He found Naomi crouched behind the couch, sobbing, her arms wrapped around her knees. He shouted commands at her. Don't move. Where's anyone else? How many people are in this house? She was 10 years old. She could barely breathe through the crying. Lucero radioed in. Minor on the premises. No other suspects. He left her there, alone. He walked back outside to stand over Denise, while Naomi's cries echoed through the open front door for every camera and every neighbor to hear. Naomi Carter had been coloring at the kitchen table when the moving truck arrived that morning. She had helped carry 2 small boxes from the truck to her new bedroom, the one with the big window that looked out onto the backyard. Her mother had promised they would hang curtains together that afternoon. Purple ones. Naomi had picked them out herself. When the sirens hit the street, Naomi moved to the living room window. She saw the police car pull onto the grass. She saw 2 officers get out with their guns pointed at her mother. She didn't understand. Her mother was just standing on the porch holding a box. The box with Naomi's name on it. The one with her books inside. She pressed her hands against the glass. Her breath fogged the window. She couldn't move. She watched Prescott grab her mother's arm and twist it. She watched her mother go down face first into the lawn. She watched a knee press into her mother's back. That was when Naomi screamed. It was the kind of scream that doesn't stop on its own, the kind that comes from a place deeper than fear. Neighbors heard it from their porches. Cell phone recordings captured it clearly, a child's voice breaking over and over, calling for her mother. Then the front door burst open. Lucero came through it with his weapon drawn, even though the door had been unlocked the entire time. He swept the room. He found Naomi behind the couch, curled into herself, arms around her knees, face wet with tears. He pointed his weapon in her direction before lowering it. Don't move. How many people are in this house? She couldn't answer. She was gasping between sobs. Mommy, I want my mommy, please. Lucero didn't kneel, didn't soften his voice, didn't explain why he was there or that her mother was okay. He keyed his radio. Minor on premises. No other suspects found. Then he turned and walked back outside, pulling the door shut behind him. Naomi stayed behind the couch for 15 minutes. Alone. In a house she had lived in for less than 3 hours. She could hear voices outside, but not her mother's. She didn't know if her mother was hurt. She didn't know if her mother was coming back. The neighbor videos captured what the body cameras missed, the sound of a child crying through an open window, calling for a mother who was face down in handcuffs 12 feet away and not allowed to answer. Gerald Forsyth had moved to Prescott Ridge 8 years earlier after retiring from a 40-year career in civil litigation. He was 72, white-haired, and had spent most of his adult life in courtrooms. He knew what lawful procedure looked like, and he knew what he was watching from his porch was not it. He had introduced himself to Denise that morning when the moving truck arrived. They had talked for a few minutes. She mentioned she was a judge. He had helped carry a box to the porch. When the officers arrived and put her on the ground, Forsyth didn't hesitate. He walked across the lawn, steady and deliberate, and stopped 6 feet from where Prescott stood over Denise. "Officers, you are making a serious mistake." Prescott barely looked at him. "Sir, step back. This is a police matter." Forsyth didn't move. "This woman is the homeowner. Her name is on the mailbox. Her deed is inside. I have her identification right here." He held up Denise's wallet and a manila folder with the closing documents she had asked him to grab from the kitchen counter. Prescott glanced at the wallet, then back at Forsyth. "We'll handle verification. Step back." Forsyth's voice hardened. "I've known this woman for 2 hours, and I already pulled up her Senate confirmation on my phone." He held the screen up, showing a news article with Denise's photograph in the headline. "She was confirmed by the United States Senate 3 weeks ago. You are handcuffing a sitting federal judge on her own property." Prescott's jaw went slack for half a second. His eyes moved from the phone screen to Denise's face, still pressed against the grass. The photo matched. The name matched. Lucero, standing behind them, went pale. His hand dropped from his belt. For the first time since they had pulled onto the lawn, neither officer moved. Neither spoke. Forsyth lowered the phone. "I suggest you uncuff her immediately and call your supervisor before this gets worse than it already is." Prescott did not uncuff her. He did not apologize. He did not check her ID. Instead, he reached for his radio and keyed the mic. "Dispatch, this is Unit 14. I need a sergeant at 4912 Wyndham Lane. Possible misidentification. Requesting guidance." Denise lay still in the grass, wrists locked behind her back, listening to the man who had just slammed her to the ground ask someone else what to do next. Sergeant Rita Bowman pulled up to 4912 Wyndham Lane 6 minutes after Prescott's radio call. She was 48, a 22-year veteran of the department, and the kind of supervisor who didn't need to raise her voice to make a room go quiet. She stepped out of her cruiser, scanned the scene, and understood immediately that something had gone very wrong. A black woman in handcuffs on a freshly sodded lawn, a moving truck in the driveway, neighbors with phones out, a child's muffled crying from inside the house. Gerald Forsyth met her halfway across the lawn, holding the wallet and the deed folder. He handed her both without a word. Bowman looked at the driver's license first, then the deed, then the news article still open on Forsyth's phone. She looked at Denise on the ground and back at Prescott. "Uncuff her, now." Prescott hesitated. "Sarge, the call said she was possibly armed." "I said uncuff her." Prescott removed the handcuffs. Denise sat up slowly, rubbing the red grooves pressed into her wrists, grass and dirt still on the side of her face. Bowman crouched in front of her. "Ma'am, I'm Sergeant Rita Bowman. I'm sorry, are you hurt?" "My daughter," Denise said. "She's inside, alone. She's been alone this whole time." Bowman stood, walked to the front door, and went inside. She found Naomi still behind the couch, knees pulled to her chest, face swollen from crying. Bowman sat on the floor beside her. "Your mom is okay. She's right outside. She's coming in to get you, I promise." She stayed with Naomi until Denise walked through the door 2 minutes later. Then Bowman went back outside and turned on Prescott. "What probable cause did you have? He got a burglary call. Did you verify ownership before drawing weapons? Did you check the mailbox? The moving truck has her name on the invoice taped to the door." Prescott said nothing. Bowman pulled both officers' radios and body cameras. She called the precinct captain from the driveway. The captain called the chief. The chief called the city attorney. Within the hour, the Charlotte FBI field office received a formal notification. An assault on a sitting federal judge is a federal crime. And when the DOJ Civil Rights Division opened a file that afternoon, The name on the intake form was familiar to half the office. Denise had worked there for 12 years. Federal investigators pulled the 911 recording within 24 hours. They played it back 4 times in a conference room at the Charlotte FBI field office. Every word was transcribed, time-stamped, and entered into evidence. There's a black woman at 4912 Wyndham Lane. She's going in and out of the house. I don't think she lives here. She's acting erratic, looking around like she's casing the place. I think she might be armed. I saw something in her waistband. She doesn't belong here. Each claim was checked against the facts. Erratic behavior. Denise had been walking boxes from a moving truck to her front door in a straight line for over an hour. Possibly armed. The object in her waistband was a tape measure, visible in both body camera footage and neighbor recordings. Casing the place. She had been measuring her own door frame. She doesn't belong here. She said it twice. Investigators then pulled Karen Langford's history with the department. What they found was not a concerned citizen making a one-time mistake. It was a pattern. 14 calls to police in 3 years. Every single one about a non-white person in the neighborhood. A black landscaper working a scheduled job. A Latino FedEx driver making a delivery. A biracial couple touring a house for sale. All unfounded. All logged. All ignored. Then the HOA email surfaced. Karen had used her position as president to coordinate what investigators would later describe as a neighborhood surveillance network targeting people of color. One email to the board read plainly, "We need to protect the character of this community before it changes." Another instructed residents to report anyone who doesn't look like they live here and let the police sort it out. Federal prosecutors determined that Karen's 911 call was not a misunderstanding. It was a fabrication. A false police report designed to provoke an armed response against an unarmed black woman on her own property. Given the documented pattern of racial targeting, the U.S. Attorney's Office added a federal hate crime charge under 18 U.S.C. Section 249. Karen Langford was arrested on a Tuesday morning, walked out of the same gated entrance she had guarded so carefully, and placed in the back of a federal vehicle. Her HOA presidency was stripped that same week by an emergency board vote. Within a month, her husband filed for divorce, citing in the petition irreconcilable differences rooted in moral disagreement. Karen's attorney released a statement calling the charges an overreach. The 911 recording said otherwise. Internal Affairs opened its investigation before the sun set on Saturday. The body camera footage from both officers was pulled, time-stamped, and logged into the department's evidence system by 4 p.m. A secure copy was sent to the FBI field office by 5. The footage from Prescott's camera began in the cruiser. He and Lucero were driving to the call, lights on, sirens wailing. Prescott glanced at Lucero and grinned. "Bet you $20 it's a crackhead." Lucero laughed. The camera caught it all. The audio was clean. The timestamp was clear. When they arrived, the footage showed Prescott pulling onto the lawn without pausing at the mailbox. It showed him exiting with his weapon drawn before assessing the scene. It showed Denise standing calmly on the porch holding a cardboard box. It captured her voice, steady and clear. "Officers, my name is Judge Denise Carter. This is my home." And it captured Prescott's response. "Sure you are. And I'm the mayor." The footage continued through the takedown, Denise lowering herself voluntarily, Prescott grabbing her wrist, the twist, the shove. Her face hitting the grass, his knee on her back, her voice underneath him. "My daughter is inside. She's 10. Please don't scare her." At no point did Prescott attempt to verify her identity. At no point did he run the address. At no point did he check the deed, the mailbox, or the moving invoice taped to the front door with her full name on it. Lucero's footage confirmed the unlawful entry. No warrant, no exigent circumstances beyond his own assumption. A weapon drawn inside a home where the only occupant was a 10-year-old girl behind a couch. Internal Affairs completed its preliminary findings within 5 days. Prescott was terminated for excessive force, racial bias, failure to follow verification procedures, and conduct unbecoming an officer. His 7 prior complaints were formally reopened. Lucero was terminated for failure to intervene, unlawful entry without a warrant, and traumatizing a minor during an unjustified search. The State Law Enforcement Certification Board opened emergency decertification proceedings against both officers within the week. Neither would ever carry a badge again. Federal prosecutors convened a grand jury to weigh criminal charges: assault on a federal official, deprivation of civil rights under color of law, conspiracy. The evidence was already in hand. Their own cameras had provided it. The neighbor videos hit the internet by Saturday evening. By Sunday morning, they had been viewed over 2 million times. The image that spread fastest was a still frame pulled from Gerald Forsyth's phone. It showed Denise Carter face down on her own lawn, wrists cuffed behind her back, a white officer's knee between her shoulder blades, while a cardboard box labeled Naomi's Books lay on its side 2 feet away. The caption someone added before sharing read simply, "She's a federal judge. This is her house." That image became the front page of 4 national newspapers by Monday. Cable news ran the story on every cycle. The phrase, "She doesn't belong here," trended for 3 consecutive days. Charlotte erupted. Protests formed outside the police precinct within 48 hours. Not riots, not chaos. Organized groups of citizens holding signs and standing in silence. Teachers, attorneys, doctors, parents with their children. They didn't chant. They held printed screenshots of the body camera footage and the 911 transcript. That silence was louder than any slogan. The mayor held a press conference Monday afternoon. He called the incident deeply troubling and promised a full and transparent review. Civil rights organizations rejected the language immediately. Deeply troubling was what politicians said when they wanted to sound concerned without committing to action. They demanded structural reform, independent oversight, a complete audit of every police call made to Prescott Ridge in the past decade. Investigative reporters delivered that audit before the city could. They pulled public records and discovered that Prescott Ridge had generated 47 police calls about suspicious people of color in 5 years. Every single one was unfounded. Not a single arrest, not a single crime confirmed. 47 calls. 47 people stopped, questioned, followed, or confronted for the crime of being non-white in a wealthy neighborhood. The police chief was asked during a live interview whether he had been aware of the pattern. He hesitated for 4 seconds before answering. That pause was clipped and reshared more than the interview itself. By Wednesday, 3 city council members had publicly called for his resignation. The city attorney's office began preparing for a lawsuit it knew was coming and knew it could not win. The evidence was already public. The body cameras had made sure of that. Judge Denise Ayanna Carter recused herself from any proceeding connected to the incident before filing the lawsuit. She would not sit in judgment of her own case. She would let the system she had spent her career building do its work. Her attorneys filed the complaint in the United States District Court for the Western District of North Carolina on a Thursday morning. The defendant list was long. The City of Charlotte. The Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. Officer Wade Prescott. Officer Danny Lucero. Karen Langford. The Prescott Ridge Homeowners Association. The allegations filled 64 pages. Unlawful arrest, excessive force, racial profiling, Fourth Amendment violations, assault on a federal official, unlawful entry of a private residence without a warrant, intentional infliction of emotional distress on a minor, conspiracy to deprive civil rights under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983, failure to train, supervise, and discipline officers with documented histories of misconduct. The section on Naomi ran 11 pages. Her therapist, Dr. Renee Whitmore, submitted a sworn declaration describing the damage. Naomi had developed recurring nightmares in which officers broke down her door. She refused to be in any room alone. She flinched at sirens. She asked her mother every morning before school whether police would come to their house again. Doctor. Whitmore described it as acute trauma consistent with a child who had been made to believe her parent was being taken from her by force. She was 10 years old. The lawsuit also included a class action component. 47 people of color had been wrongfully targeted by police calls originating from Prescott Ridge over the past 5 years. Each had been stopped, questioned, detained, or forced to leave based on nothing but their appearance. Their names were added to the complaint. Their experiences were documented. They were no longer isolated incidents. They were a pattern. Discovery broke the case open further. Internal police emails showed that supervisors had been aware of the volume of calls from Prescott Ridge for years. One captain had written to a lieutenant 18 months earlier. "We're getting a lot of calls from that gated community. Same type every time. Unfounded." The lieutenant's response was 3 words: respond and document. No investigation was opened. No pattern analysis was conducted. No one asked why every single call involved a person of color. The city's legal team reviewed the body camera footage, the 911 recording, the emails, the class action filings, and the therapist's declaration. Their recommendation to the city council was unanimous and immediate. Settle. Do not take this to trial. You will not win. The settlement was reached 5 months after the lawsuit was filed. The Carter family received $1.8 million in damages. The 47 class action plaintiffs shared an additional $600,000 compensation fund, with individual amounts determined by the severity of each incident. But the money was not the center of the agreement. The mandated reforms were. The city agreed to establish an independent civilian oversight board with full investigative authority over police misconduct complaints. Mandatory verification protocols were implemented for all property-related calls, requiring officers to confirm ownership records, check identification, and make visual assessments before any use of force. Quarterly demographic audits of all police interactions would be conducted and published publicly. The entire department would undergo retraining in implicit bias, de-escalation, and constitutional rights. Body camera compliance would be enforced with a zero-tolerance policy. Any officer who failed to activate their camera during a citizen interaction would face immediate suspension. The criminal cases moved on a parallel track. A federal grand jury indicted Wade Prescott on 2 counts: deprivation of rights under color of law, 18 U.S.C. Section 242, and assault on a federal official. The body camera footage was the prosecution's primary exhibit. His own voice, his own hands, his own knee. The jury deliberated for less than a day, guilty on both counts. The judge sentenced Prescott to 4 years in federal prison. She noted in her remarks that his record of prior complaints demonstrated a pattern the department had chosen to ignore, and that this failure had culminated in the assault of a sitting federal judge on her own property in front of her child. Danny Lucero was convicted of deprivation of rights and unlawful entry. He received 18 months. His attorney argued he had simply followed a senior officer's lead. The judge was unmoved. Following orders is not a defense when the orders are unconstitutional. Karen Langford pleaded guilty to filing a false police report and 1 count of a federal hate crime under 18 U.S.C. Section 249. Her 911 call, her history of targeting, and the HOA emails left no room for a viable defense. She was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison. She became the first person in North Carolina convicted under federal hate crime statutes for a weaponized 911 call. Legal analysts called it a landmark. The precedent was set. A phone call made with the intent to provoke an armed police response against a person based on their race was not a misunderstanding. It was a crime. 1 month after the settlement, Judge Denise Ayanna Carter walked into the Charles R. Jonas Federal Building in Charlotte, wearing her judicial robes for the first time. Naomi held her hand. A U.S. Marshal opened the door to her chambers. On her desk sat a drawing Naomi had made during therapy. 2 figures holding hands in front of a house with purple curtains. Denise placed it next to her nameplate and sat down. Her first case that week was a housing discrimination complaint. A black family alleged they had been systematically excluded from a rental property based on race. Denise ruled with a precision her colleagues described as measured but unmistakable. She never referenced her own experience from the bench. She didn't need to. Naomi was still seeing Dr. Whitmore twice a week. The nightmares came less often now.
She had made a friend on the street, a girl named Lily, whose family had moved in after the case made national news. They rode bikes in the cul-de-sac where the cruiser had torn up the lawn. New sod covered the tire marks. Karen Langford's house sat empty, a for sale sign in the yard, curtains drawn, no offers. The HOA was dissolved and reformed under new bylaws prohibiting discriminatory reporting. A bronze plaque was installed at the neighborhood entrance. This community welcomes all residents equally. Denise used part of the settlement to establish the Carter Justice Initiative, a nonprofit providing free legal representation to victims of racially motivated false police reports. In its first year, the foundation took on 23 cases across 3 states. She never spoke publicly about what happened on her lawn. When a reporter asked off the record how she felt, she said only this: "I didn't need them to believe I was a judge. I needed them to treat me like a citizen." That should have been enough. They tried to tell her she didn't belong. She belonged more than any of them knew. This case was brutal, but the case on the right spirals completely out of control.